So obviously, I think almost all of you, I at least have a little bit of knowledge of who you are, but a couple of you I'm just meeting today. So for your benefit, I'm Ashley. Very, very nice to meet you. And I'm excited to share with you a little bit of my journey with personal values. And I don't stand before you today as an expert in this area, but simply just someone who God has been working on this for a little over a decade in my life. And so I have a strong firsthand experience and passion for this particular topic. And I've gone from being powerless in this area to what I believe, God has transformed into a powerful testimony. And so I'm hoping to take you on that same journey today and kind of explain to you my walk and my experience. This topic in and of itself is very personal. So there may be things that we talk about today that you haven't thought of that way. Maybe you don't even necessarily agree with, but I challenge you to let it make you think differently. And then as you go home and you process it and you decide, hey, I think maybe this is something I can incorporate in my own life, I would love to hear your journey with it on the other side. Hi, welcome. Are you in the wrong? Hey, well, it was great to see you. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Enjoy your breakout session. Perfect. Yes, perfect timing. But like I said, I wouldn't be where I am without the wonderful people sitting on the front row here. So I just want to introduce you guys to my mom. She is part of the reason why I can stand here today, so I'm very grateful for her. And I'm not going to boo-hoo. I'm going to move on past that. This is my sister and my biggest fan. We are as close as you can possibly get in age without being twins. Next week, we'll officially be the same age for 6 weeks before I have my next birthday. So if we sound the same or look the same, it's because we are only 10 months apart. So this is Laura and her daughter, Anna. Laura is a part of a group that I meet with twice a month. And we formulated ourselves as a mastermind of mom entrepreneurs back, 4 years ago? Roughly 4, maybe a little longer than that. And then at the time, there were 12 of us that were meeting. We all had a full-time job and what we called a side hustle. Most of the ladies in our group have transitioned to being full-time in their side hustles, which has been a really cool journey. And there are 5 of the 12 of us left, going awesome. Strong. Awesome. And Laura and the other 4 girls in that group have really helped me set and achieve some really awesome goals in my own personal life. And saying the right yeses, using my voice, those are all goals that have been a part of my story over the last 2 years. So standing here and getting to talk to you is actually execution of one of those goals. It's very practical for me. So Laura, thanks for encouraging me to say yes. It's really been fun. And honestly, having that healthy accountability a couple times a month, and honestly, just being vulnerable with one another when we're not headed towards a goal that we wrote down has been really healthy for me as well. So if you don't have a tribe like that, especially in light of the message we just came out of, be that kind of person for someone else, because I believe that God rewards the connections that you have in your life. And if you desire that and you be that, I think you'll have that in life. And when we moved here from Atlanta in 2014, I left a season full of rich relationships and people that were just like Laura in my life, but in a different capacity. And when I got here, I suddenly didn't have that anymore. And I thought, how am I ever going to establish something that took me 12 years in Atlanta to have from a relationship level? And I spent 2 years in a really deep loneliness because I didn't have that. So being here 7 years later and being able to say that God restores everything that you've asked for is also a really cool part of my testimony. And so you're here as we talk about values, that we're going to start speaking a different language a little bit together today, because these words that you may have heard, like community or relationship, they become crafted into our life story and suddenly become a value, either that has been cultivated or one that we had from our foundation. So that's kind of what I want to jump into a little bit today. How many of you would say that you understand core values, or you've thought about it before? You've heard the term, you maybe talk about it with your kids or in your jobs. Okay, awesome. So it's not brand new, I don't think, to anybody, which is really good. And I think that today, when we're looking at the topic of values, there's 2 things that I want to portray. The first one is that values often speak to who we are. It's built into our DNA, whether that's our personal history, the environment we grew up in, the parents that we had, the household. But also on the other side of that, I think values can speak to who we want to be And so those are kind of the two things that we're going to break down today, and how they relate to my story and how I think they can relate to yours as well. And the easiest way I know how to do that is by telling you what I believe in my journey values are and what they are not. So if you're taking notes, there are 5 things that I want to go through today that I believe values are and that they are not. And that's the clearest way that we're going to walk through that together today. So I think it's important when we're talking about values, when it comes to who we are, we think about what drives us. It's important to take into account our history, a self-evaluation, where we came from, what we celebrate, what we spend our time doing or have spent our time doing. All of who we are has shaped us into the current values that we have. Values also speak to our desires or who we want to be known for, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I was much like you guys, where I had heard of core values. I grew up in a faith-based home, and I knew that a lot of the core values that I heard spoken out loud just happened to also be fruits of the Spirit, or, things I heard from a biblical background. But not everybody in my life had that background that I did. And the cool thing about using words like generosity or kindness or honesty is that they cross that boundary. So whether someone had a faith-based background, or like my neighbors currently who don't even believe in the same God that I do, they may not want to talk about Jesus or scripture or humility from a biblical standpoint, but they want to talk about being kind and being generous. So they cross boundaries, and that has been part of what has made me stuck to this topic, because it's allowed me to have conversations with everybody. There has been no icebreaker have I ever found where someone didn't want to have these conversations. So be thinking about that as we discuss it a little bit. Now, when I actually started digging into the concept of core values, I had just moved to Atlanta. I was 19 years old, and the church that I was a part of every month put out one core value on a big board. They emailed it to all the parents in the children's ministry. And for an entire month, they focused all of their Bible stories, they called them drive times, so they were CDs that we listened to, back when we listened to CDs. CDs, and then mealtime, where it was a devotion that you could do at the table with your family. And every month, everything we did focused on that one core value. So that was my first exposure to understanding that, this isn't a word, but this is something I can live out. This is something I can do. It's practical. Something I can teach my kids one day, because clearly I didn't have kids at 19. So that was kind of my first exposure to it. You say thank God?
I said almost.
Almost. Well, yeah. Jackson came shortly after. But anyway, I was really excited about this idea once it started to come out. In fact, I got so passionate about it that I started spending time with the people that were writing the curriculum. And I thought, I have that creative edge. I can write some of this. So I started writing plays with them and making up songs that had to do with respect. Like we would all say respect for God and others. And I just write this little stuff with them. And so it kind of became a part of the fabric of what I talked about and who I was. And really since then, this has kind of been part of my story. So I just want to explain a little bit of where that came from, because I do think that, like I said, values in general are part of our makeup, but it just happened that values specifically were a huge part of my past. So that's where that passion came from for me. Okay, so the very first thing I want to discuss as far as values go, values are personal convictions. Values are not, so if you want to make a line to the other side, a fair expectation to hold others to. One of our friends in our mastermind on Monday nights that I was talking about, she does this from an HR perspective. She helps train leaders and executives in making brand statements and choosing values for their companies and their organizations. And we recently walked through that together as a mastermind from a corporate level. And one of the phrases that she put out there is that values are the magnets in my moral compass. And I don't even know who spoke that. But when we're talking about what values are, they are a personal moral compass. They are a personal conviction. They're also identified by a blend of our history, as we just discussed, our unique giftings, maybe our strengths, and the needs that we long to meet in the world. So that's personal to who we are. Heather and I, we just discussed, are the same age for 6 weeks. We grew up in the same house. We have very similar giftings, but still, we may act out or execute a value differently. So even though so many things are similar in our lives, we may never execute humility or generosity or adaptability the same way because we're not the same people. And that's the beauty of having a personal value, is that it is personal to you. So it's not fair in any situation, whether it's a marriage or a relationship or a colleague at work, or, I've even been in some leadership capacities at work where it was someone I was a superior of, for me to ever hold that same expectation to another person when it's my own personal value. Now, in just a little bit, we'll talk about how this idea of values can be in a workplace and can be in an organization where you can speak these out loud and everybody that's a part of the organization has that as part of their DNA. But in this specific example, it wouldn't be fair for me to have a personal conviction and hold someone else to that same standard because it's personal. The second thing that values are is that they're foundational. The Latin origin, according to Google and Webster's, has multiple definitions for the word foundation. It is the lowest load-bearing part, an underlying basis or principle, usually a stone or a concrete structure supporting something from underneath. It also can mean the act of establishing. And the cool thing about foundation to me, that last one, the act of establishing, means that it can be built on. So that's why I believe that not only are values part of what we're already made of by default, because we have certain pasts and certain histories, but they also can speak to our future because we can always build upon a foundation. So our values are the underlying support of the structures of our lives. They hold us up, they strengthen us, they establish us. Proverbs 5:24 says, "Wise people are builders. They build families, businesses, communities. Through intelligence and insight, their enterprises are established and they endure." Some of our values will transfer with us into every season of life because they're a part of our foundation forever. Others, however, can be more seasonal. This is a really cool one for me because I think it's important to recognize in this that we don't have to have the same value forever. It doesn't need to be written in stone. And if you have something that you long to be in the future, you can actually put action steps behind that and make that a part of your testimony on the other side. I'm skipping a little bit ahead of myself here, but I just want to kind of put this in here. If an organization says, I would like growth to be a part of my 2022 plan, like right now, the organization I work for, that's a huge focus for us in 2022. We want to expand, we want to grow, we want to bring on more team members, but we also want to increase our influence. That may not be the case 3 years from now. We might have hit our capacity on employees. We might have reached the influence that we want to. And so once that becomes a part of your foundation, now you have something else that you can build upon. So I just think it's important to note that. And I'll probably keep reiterating that, but I just don't want everyone to think, well, if I had a different past than you and faith wasn't a part of my life, that just because it wasn't built into who I am doesn't mean it can't be who I want to be. So a lot of times I say that over and over for myself as well. We have to give ourselves space, time. It looks differently for everyone to reevaluate, to pivot, to redefine, which leads us to what this value isn't. It's not a one-size-fits-all forever. We just talked about that a little bit. For all the perfectionists out there like me, remember, we're not using permanent markers. We're not writing in concrete on every life value. It doesn't define every little moment of your life now and forever. Think of it more of a colored pencil. It still adds color to your life for a season, but it's still made of lead, so it can be erased or it can dissolve into the next season. The next thing that values are, number 3, is a gauge or a measurement for growth. What values are not is automatic. If I, in just a minute, give you a list of 40 values, it's highly likely that you're going to want to have all of those be a part of your life. And if you're like me, you may say, can't I just be all the things? And the answer is yes. I mean, you can definitely live all of that, but you can't live them all at one time simultaneously. So they're good things, but the value in value, there you go, is that they're unique to you, whether it's your life or it's your season of life. Like fine gems or jewels. They're rare and they're personal. Besides, like I said, it's not feasible to live out 35 things at one time, especially in the world that we live on. I mean, we're not Jesus, right? So I guess he could have done that. The idea of values is that you're able to define them that in a way that brings you freedom and it motivates you towards a life to the full, a life of being all that God created you to uniquely be. And I think sometimes we look at the fruit of the Spirit or just Christianity in general, a life with Jesus, as a set of rules. And I think that values are the way that we get to live freely as who God called us to be, and we don't have to look at it like a set of rules. So actually, that's what values are not. They're not a list of rules. They're not empty promises. Okay, hold on. I went ahead of myself.
Oh, can you
go back?
Can you go to I was writing down and I didn't catch it. What was it, the not part of after gauge?
Yes,
what was the
that was what I just skipped ahead on. Values are a gauge or a measurement for growth.
Okay.
This is where the portion of the beginning of our conversation came from. Although I do think values are the drive that make us who we are, I literally skipped to the next one, so I'm going to go back. I also believe that values can define who we want to be. In this way, values are a great tool and a measurement for growth. This isn't easy or as easy as saying, I want to be known as a wise person, and all of a sudden, wisdom is automatically a value of your life. This one, like any growth, takes intentionality. These are some action steps that you could take if you decided that, hey, I'm not necessarily feeling like I'm wise or I have wisdom in my life. You could say things like, I'd like to interview people that know about this. They are a subject matter expert. They've gone through this experience. I'd like to read more regularly, memorize this, listen to a podcast, journal so I can go back and see what I had and what I have now. The intentionality plus the time becomes the equation that equals a cultivated value. So I'm going to go back to that again. Intentionality plus time is the equation that equals a cultivated value. So this is how it is a gauge or a measurement tool. They are not automatic. That's where I skipped it, sorry. They are not automatic. We can look back at some of the things we've already said, like building on our foundation, and perhaps reposition values in different seasons because we've built it in and we made space for another. So that was going back a little bit. Sorry about that. So number 3, they are a gauge or a measurement for growth. They are not automatic. Number 4, they are specific and they bring fulfillment. This is where I was talking and I got really ahead of myself. So this is where I said if you saw the list of 45 values, you may want to be all of them. But because we're not God, we can't necessarily live out all of those things at one time. So it's important that we recognize in certain seasons what's rare, what's specific, and what brings me fulfillment. Because I think that if you're living something out, like generosity, for example, has been on my list for years of values. I think that I maybe felt like I had a poverty mindset, so I didn't know how to be generous outside of money, and I never felt like I could be because I was trapped by the idea or the concept of money. So I started asking God, okay, help me think through the value of generosity different. I can give my time, I can give my talent, and I can give my treasure if I have the opportunity to bless someone once a quarter or once a month if it was financial. So just a reminder that there is a way to incorporate that. And when we have the right thing at the right time, it brings us freedom. And so that's why I put on there that it is specific, but it also brings fulfillment. Because when you start walking in a value that you're cultivating, especially one you didn't have before, I think it does truly bring a level of fulfillment. And that's when values are not the list of rules or empty promises. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Did I back up enough and fill in the gaps? Okay. All right, awesome. Thanks for going with me there. Number 5, last one. Values are a healthy accountability, in quotes or in parentheses, when expressed. That's the part that we need to remember. They are not meant to be kept to ourselves. Once I'm able to define my values, I can then live them out. If I speak it or say it out loud that I want to be a generous person, that's the example I just said, I now have to hold myself accountable to what I just spoke out loud. If you take it a step further and you write it down and you put it somewhere, it's highly likely somebody's going to see that. So now you're accountable to another person, which is exactly why I appreciate the group that I meet with. Most of you already know this, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Proverbs 27:17. It says, it takes a grinding wheel to sharpen a blade, and so is one person that sharpens the character of another. So writing it down, it allows others to see, help, and hold accountable to that which you have expressed. Iron sharpens iron. And this is where the power side comes, from powerless to powerful. Once you've defined the values, you decide that you can walk in them, you can live them, you can speak them, you can share them. And that's the power of a personal value. If I understand my values in a way that allows me to apply it to the way that I live with conviction, I suddenly value others at the same time. This is where real change and real difference happens. Another cool thing is that, let's say we're crossing this line back into corporate America again, and you have had those conversations where you say, all right, as a company, not only is this our mission, but these are the core values that we live by. We want to be generous with the things that we have. So we have a benevolent fund here, or we have a nonprofit that we give to. Maybe we also have growth on there. I just mentioned that one as well. And there's a handful of things that you've put out there that now to your board, to your employees, to your executives, there's an accountability there because you've just put it out there for everyone. Well, the best thing from my perspective that does from an accountability level is it now gives you something to go back to. So if you need to have a difficult conversation with somebody, you can say, hey, how do you think things are going in this area? Is there maybe one of these values that you don't feel like aligns with that? And it's a really easy way to push the right people out and bring the right people in, because you can very easily go back to something to see if it aligns with what you want to do. So you can see you go from thinking it to speaking it, where you're holding yourself accountable, to writing it down and expressing it, and suddenly you have a whole nother level of accountability because there are people now that are out there that have heard it and that are see it. And that, to me, isn't where the rules come into play, but that's where the freedom comes into play. There's freedom and fulfillment in being able to express that. So it's my goal that we're going to go through that journey together right now, individually, but talk it out at the same time. I always said, don't give me the IKEA instruction manual. I don't want to sit down and figure it out. I want to see the YouTube video. I want to see how it goes right in front of me. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, is that we're going to have a YouTube tutorial moment together in this next step. So the way I'm going to do that is start by sharing something very basic about my personal life and my background. And this actually happened, so this is a real story. And then by a raise of hands, tell me some values that you might be able to pin to my background and my history, okay? Because remember, we said at the very beginning, values, they speak to who we are, and oftentimes that's a direct result of the way we grew up, our environment, our household. And so that's where we're going to start, and then we'll look at the values for who we want to be in the future, okay? So these are just some bullet points from my history. So be thinking of some core values that would go along with it. I grew up in a home that regularly talked about God and the importance of a relationship with Jesus. Meaningful family traditions were important to us. We had a large blended family. We cared about including others. We had great friends. We played lots of games. We traveled regularly, and we laughed regularly. I was a hardworking student. I cared about the approval of teachers and friends, and I really liked rewards. I took a good number of missions trips on school breaks. I chose a non-traditional college that allowed me to experience school hands-on. I'm a hands-on person. I told you, YouTube. Don't give me the IKEA book, right? I got to apply my passions and skills through school through a unique internship. Those are just a few things. We'll stop there. Anybody want to pull out some values that you, now that you're starting to think this way, from my history or my background, what are some things that you would say? You can't say a wrong thing, so don't be worried about that. Yes?
Authenticity.
Love it. It's a great one. So the one I would put on there is maybe community is what I wrote down. Community was really important to me, but the right kind of community. That's where the authenticity comes in. Great answer. Anything else?
Hard work.
I'm sorry?
Hard work.
Yes, excellence.
Christian values.
Faith, that's on here. Yep.
Someone that's like fun.
Yes, joy.
Yeah.
Yep. Family is on here, and service. So just in doing this on my own and giving you kind of a snapshot into how I've journeyed through this, you can kind of see that it's not as hard as you think it is. It's a really cool way to define how God's uniquely given you a way to live out your values and to feel fulfilled in that. Does everybody have a cell phone? Okay. I am going to walk around with a QR code, and I would love for you to scan this. And this is going to pull up a list of values. This is by no means a full list of values. These are just common ones. Do you get it? Is it working? Yes, score. Technology, when it works, is my best friend.
So high tech.
So high tech.
Maybe that was one of her new values.
I know.
High tech. Always changing.
Do I put that on my camera?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at you, Mama Rita.
Oh, no.
Did it work?
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Right there.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yep.
good.
Yep. Are we almost there? There you go, Heather.
Okay, got it.
Oh, you guys have the new update. Yours is
Hold
in
on,
the
give it to
center.
me. There you go.
Didn't it used to just pull up when you did it? Like
Yeah.
you didn't have to actually
I
tap
have the old
something now?
version, so it's on the top. You guys have to tap now.
Yep, thank you.
All the really high-tech people have the updates on their phone over here. That is not me. Yes. I'm sorry? It's working?
No.
Is it not working? What?
Did you get it?
Did you get it to work? Did you
Did you
pull
get
up the list? Sorry,
Oh,
I was
no,
half
I
paying
didn't.
attention.
No, I didn't pull up the list.
Oh, do you want to pull up the list? Here, I'll let you hold this so you can scan it. There you go.
Okay, you're gonna have to help me because I don't.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
don't-
You actually had
okay.
it a
I
second
know you
ago.
said I had it.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I had to tap on it.
There you go.
Okay.
On it. Thank you, Beck. Of course. Okay, so this is just an example list of some core values. I would love for you to take just a minute and think about some bullet points from your own background and the way that you were raised or the home you lived in or the school you went to, and identify either actual values that are on that list or other ones. And there may be 12 or 15 of them that stand out to you. But the goal today is that we're going to get that list under 6. And once you're able to identify those together, I brought these cards up so you can come pick 6, 7 cards, either colorful or white, whatever your jam is. And there's some pins up here. And I just want you to kind of walk through this journey and be able to define what you are based on your background, but also what you want to be. So first from the lens of what maybe was built into your DNA. Does everybody have a couple on there? Does anybody need a pen? No? Okay.
So background first.
Background first, so the lens of who I am.
Okay.
And then if you're already done with that, we'll move to the second lens of who I want to be. Just so you know, the first time I did this, Laura, when I did it through the branding exercise, how many did I have? 11? I think it was 11. And the girl we walked through with, because I've always done this from a personal perspective. So when I was challenged to do it from a corporate perspective this year, like an executive level, it totally changed my way of thinking about this. And a cool thing I just want to drop here is, so I married a habitual entrepreneur. We've owned multiple businesses and we're always seeking out new adventure. So for me, oftentimes what I'm defining for myself, by default I'm defining for our business because our last name has almost always been on the door or the website of that company. And so it's been very interesting to see how a lot of those personal values have crossed over. And just in the last few years, I've gone back to working for other organizations and other people and still have some of those things we own on the side. But it's been really cool to be a part of leadership teams that have defined this without me, and then seeing how I align with what it's a really cool way to know where you want to be in life and define who you want to work for and who you want to spend your time with. And I would encourage you, if you are looking for a job or you're not interested in starting your own business, part of the interview process should be, what are your core values? If it's not on their website, if it is, just study the website and just decide, God, is this where you have for me? Do my core values in this season line up with, what direction they're headed as a company? I think it really helps and makes you feel a little bit more fulfilled when you're aligned in that way.
Good.
Once you have written some down or tagged a couple, if you could come up and grab some cards and just write them on one side, and then we're going to take it one step further before we close. I told you I could talk in 10 minutes today. We did a good job in that. We even started late.
Your list, is there like a place that you've gotten your resources from, like for this list of values? Or these are ones you came up with, or?
Some of them are ones that I've come up with or experienced either through full-time ministry when I was back in college, or the branding exercise we did. I pulled some from that list, like adaptability and things more from a business perspective. So I tried to create a blended list of personal and corporate, like organizational and personal.
Oh, we get a
Yeah,
different card
but
for
there
each
may be. I'm sorry.
word? A different card for each word?
Yes, a different card for each word.
Okay.
Yep. But yeah, there may be, Sarah, more words on there that you would like to use to define, and they're not even on that list. Absolutely. I used like 4 different sources to kind of create that, to answer your question.
Also, can you teach me how to write?
I know.
Oh.
Anybody that needs someone to write your core values for you, Sarah has the best handwriting in the world. So,
Kind of you.
like classic teacher handwriting.
Beautiful.
That's my one skill that has come with me.
It goes everywhere.
I love that. I love that. And just for the purpose of the recording, I'm going to throw out there what we're going to do next, but then I'm going to turn the recording off. So the idea behind this isn't that you're just posting these, but really that you're able to define them and live them out. Because again, that's where it goes from powerless to powerful. And the topic of this class was called The Power of Personal Value. And the power comes from living that out in a day. That's what makes the difference. And so on the backs of these cards, after we write and identify a few of them, we're going to write a personal statement on how we want to live that out in our lives. So that's the journey we're going to go on over the next 10 minutes before we go.
This is for the who I want to or for the who I...
Both. At this point, we're doing it all together.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. And if anybody, before I turn off the recording, wants to maybe pick a couple of bullet points just to practice from your background that you would like to say out loud, and we can help you identify some of those, I would love to do that in like a shotgun type of environment as well. Sometimes things don't come as naturally to me as they do to other people. So if there's anybody that wants to talk that out, feel free to do that with us now. It's really cool to get to do this with a family. You know, for me to see what my mom and sister are going to pick versus what I pick is going to be really awesome. And same for Laura and Anna.
You say that like I'm going to show you.
Okay. I love it. I really appreciate all of you being vulnerable. I know that this isn't always comfortable for everybody. So this is a really cool thing. I hope that you're challenged to think about how you live out some things a little bit differently. And we'll continue over the next few minutes to go through the journey, but I just wanted to publicly thank you.